Sanjoy Sanyal and the founder of Regain Paradise, a boutique clean tech consulting firm. Our New Ventures podcast series brings to you conversations with thinkers and practitioners in the area of environmental innovation. Welcome to the New Ventures podcast. We have as our guest today, Kiran Pereira, who is the author of the book Sand Stories. She's also the founder of sandstories.org. Welcome to the podcast, Kiran. Our guest for today also includes Rajiv Khosla, who is the founder of Bignify, a technology and management consulting and execution firm. Welcome, Rajiv.
Thank you, Sanjoy.
You know, one of the things that you say in the book is that sand is in everything, right? But obviously, one major component of the use of sand is in the construction industry, right? Could you frame the scope of the problem, the overuse of sand in the construction industry?
Absolutely. So the construction industry is deemed to be the world's biggest consumer of sand. The UNEP estimates that we currently use about 50 billion tons a year, and that translates 18 kilos per person per day. There's no other resource that's used in such volumes, not even fossil fuels. We're talking about a resource that is more than steel, more than fossil fuels, more than bio-based biomass, more than anything you can think about. So just to help us understand the kind of scale, I'm going to quote research by the Queensland University's Sustainable Minerals Institute. So Professor Daniel Franks, he did some recent research, and he talks about how if you look at the amount of gold that has been produced in all of history, it would fill 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools. But if we look at the amount of sand and gravel that we are extracting every year from our natural systems, it would not fill even 10 million Olympic-sized swimming pools. So that's the kind of scale that we're talking about. Absolutely mind-numbing. It's hard to wrap your head around the volume of material that we are extracting from our ecosystems. The problem lies in the fact that sand and gravel are not renewable resources in human timescales. They are renewed, but over geological timescales. So as far as policymakers are concerned, these are non-renewable resources, and they need to be treated as finite resources. What complicates the matter is that not every kind of sand is suitable for use in every use. So for example, desert sand is not often used in construction because the grains are shaped by wind rather than by water. This makes the grains too rounded, and so they don't offer concrete as much structural strength and cohesion as grains shaped by water. This means that we are extracting sand and gravel from places that are ultimately limited. They might have a large stock, but as the UNEP report explains, if you think about it in terms of a bank account, recent research has found that in the 20th century, we have seen a 23-fold increase in the use of natural resources extracted for our building environment. So if you think in terms of a bank account, and we start spending, if we increase our expenditure by 23-fold, it's not going to last very long, is it?
Right. And not everybody understands the humongous use of sand in construction industry. The fact that, as you so very nicely put it, that is not renewable in a human time scale. It is renewable only in a geological time scale. In the construction industry, where is sand used for?
Primarily in concrete, where concrete contains about 60 to 75% sand and gravel. Depending on the kind of concrete and depending on the application and the country, it's like recipes, right? Like recipes are different. You might have the same dish, but the recipes are slightly different in different countries. So it's the same for concrete, or at least that's the way I like to think about it, because it makes it more accessible for me. Either way, so concrete is a dominant user, but also the construction industry needs to think about glass. Glass, for example, when you talk about glass panels that go on building facades, any business district that you talk about today has high-rise buildings that with glass facades. Now, this glass, flat glass, contains about 70% silica sand. So what's currently happening is that we are extracting this massive volume of resources from our natural resources. We're building things. And at the end of life, when either the market needs change or we decide this building is not good enough, or we want to build a better building that's more climate friendly, things like that, we're tearing things down and sending stuff to the landfill. And that's a huge waste of resources. And that's what we need to address.
Absolutely. So just to help our listeners understand this, sand is used in making of concrete. Concrete is, if I just have to write an equation, it is cement plus sand plus a few other things. And sand is also used in glass. But isn't sand also used in the manufacturing of cement itself?
Yes, absolutely. Especially when the clay does not have enough silica content. That's when sand is used. So apart from that, sand is also used in pigments that are used in paints and plastics, roofing granules, roof membranes that are used in roofing. All these contain pigments that are extracted from sand. They can be extracted from rock, but it's more profitable to extract them from heavy mineral sands. And that's the problem, because these heavy mineral sands come from coastal areas, which are going to face an incredible challenge with the sea level rise and climate change and things like that. So we really have to take all these factors into account.
Right. So sand is used in the paint that sort of you put on the building inside and outside. It is used in the cement itself. It is used as a mixture for the cement to make concrete, and is used in the glass. So it's really an important component of the construction industry, which is why this conversation is so very important. Now, just stepping away from the use of sand, we also know, climate professionals like me are also concerned that, the construction industry is a huge emitter of carbon and carbon dioxide. So, depending on what you look at, Bill Gates, for example, in his latest book, has said that what he calls the material things, which of course includes construction industry, but also includes things like plastics, is about 31% of the total carbon that is there, that we have to suck out of the atmosphere. The solutions that you talk about in the book, do they sort of target both the emissions angle and the sand angle, or are these two different topics?
It depends on several factors. It depends. Let me give you an example. In colder climates, for example, there's a great push towards insulating buildings, right? So we're talking about triple glazed glass and things like that for buildings. If we don't address the underlying system of the way the economy works, where we extract material, we use it, and then we dump it in the landfill, implementing triple glazed glass could actually increase the amount of sand that's being extracted from systems, and it could make things worse, right? So it really depends on, so as I mentioned in the book, it's really, really important to reduce emissions, but it cannot come at the cost of everything else. There really has to be balance. If you go to the gym, for example, and you exercise just one muscle, it's not going to be very sustainable or desirable, right? You have to look at the overall body of the human being. It's the same in nature. You have to take into account the big picture and try and implement solutions that are as holistic as possible, given our current knowledge. There are solutions that will drastically reduce carbon emissions. So there are solutions being explored, such as rammed earth construction. There are poured earth. People are building in raw earth, for example. And the idea is that if you don't bind up this material in concrete, it makes it more easy to recycle the material and build something new again. As long as you build it, as long as you protect the roof and protect the foundations, and you build it with care, it's absolutely possible to build well and to live well and reduce our climate emissions. I hope that answers the question.
It does. I mean, it brings up so many interesting points. I think the one point that you bring up, and let me make sure that I understand this, is that reducing the electricity use in buildings by things like triple glaze. What was it you said? Triple glaze glass, right?
Yes. Windows.
Yeah, windows would actually increase the use of sand.
Not only sand, it's also fossil fuels. For example, glass is hugely, it takes huge amount of fossil fuels to create this glass. I see people talking about solutions where they add titanium dioxide to products and claim that this is a green product. And that's greenwashing, because if you don't really go into the life cycle analysis, where titanium dioxide requires huge amount of fossil fuels in order to be made, if you don't consider how these products are made, you might be making matters worse. So it's important to look at the big picture, really, really important to look at the big picture.
Right, absolutely. You call it going to the gym and thinking of a total body conditioning, right? But the other way to think about it is having a systems approach to this type of thinking. So maybe we're getting into the most interesting topic today, which is, tell us a little bit about the solutions that work for the construction industry. And I think you're basically hinting this towards thinking of a circular economy in the construction industry, right?
Absolutely.
Which is going to be sort of lower emissions and lower the use of sand, right? So in your book, you talk about a range of these options, right? So maybe tell us, for our listeners, what type of solutions are being piloted or used.
So I found it really interesting to see that people are working on solutions at a variety of different scales. You have individual practices who are doing really exceptional work, and you also have, if it's now scaling up to cities who are, for example, Amsterdam has decided to become 100% circular by 2050. And they aim to halve their use of natural resources by 2030. So that's less than 10 years away. And you're talking about a city that has placed on public record its ambitions to, halve the use of all materials that go into building a city. And that's the kind of ambition we need, because it's absolutely possible that humans are incredibly creative, and we can help you reach wider audiences for sure. So having said that, the kind of solutions that I have seen, they range from individual practices, architectural practices, who are now looking at employing bio-based materials, local materials, regenerative materials in designing their buildings. So this is not in the book, but I discovered it a little later. There's one particular practice that has designed a famous opera house in the UK, where the design calls for the use of oyster shells and instead of limestone, and it calls for use of timber from local trees that were dying because of disease, but they're converting that into timber and using. So really using regenerative local materials can be a huge solution, because that can cut down your carbon footprint quite a bit. But innovation is not just found in places like the UK, it's also found in developing countries. For example, there's a practice called Made in Earth in Bangalore, they are making apartment complexes with Adobe. Absolutely modern, stunning looking apartments from at least the concept design that I have seen online. And they're looking at building a community college again with local renewable materials. So that's the kind of, I'm seeing a lot of traction from young people to address the climate change, to climate emergency. And that's really, really important that we take action now.
So, I mean, from what you're saying, at least just making sure that I understand this, you're talking about individual practices, meaning these are individual architects
Yes.
and individual construction firms, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in your book, one of the interesting sort of examples, since you brought up Amsterdam, you talk a lot about this, shall I call it a company or shall I call it a partnership of companies called New Horizon Urban Mining Collecting? I mean, I thought that was fascinating, right?
Yes, I found it fascinating too, because I love the quote where he says, the Stone Age did not end because we ran out of stones. So, and that kind of really brought it home for me. It made me stop and think. And yes, it was so interesting to speak to.
So I think, the interesting thing for me was the way they operated.
Absolutely.
Here's one company which had one offering, but it operated as a collective, as a partnership. Yes. Our audience will be very keen to understand your insights into this model.
Yes. So what really struck me when I spoke to Michel Bars, the founder of that particular collective, was that he started off by taking inspiration from the famous architect Thomas Rao, who says that waste is just a material without an identity. So for him, he tried to make inroads, but what he found was that the construction industry can be quite conservative. And so trying to create this whole new industry from scratch didn't seem like a very smart thing to do. What he realized is that when he teamed up with existing players in the market, with existing people who already had major contracts and they were able to add to the services that they offered, he found that the uptake was much better. So he was able to put together this collective. They deal with everything from risk management to materials to marketing to, so it's really, really interesting to see how they collaborate with each other and try not to reinvent, make the circular economy grow faster. It's a fantastic example.
Yeah.
And I think we need to see more of such partnerships across.
But let's delve into this a little bit more. So, what does this individual company, New Horizon, do? And what do its partners do? And what is the collective offering they bring to their customers? And who are their customers in the first place?
So their customers range from, they started off, I think one of the biggest examples that I can give you is the Circle project from ABN AMRO, which is a famous bank,
of
right?
Course.
And so ABN AMRO wanted to redesign a particular building, and they just wanted a new meeting space. And so with the help of this urban mining collective, they've designed a new building that is absolutely fantastic. And it's if you put it in current terms, it's quite expensive. It's not the way we can build going forward. But at the time when it was built, nobody knew what they were talking about. Nobody knew what circular economy is or how it would work. So it was really interesting to see this particular group of companies come together and push the envelope. You had insulation that came from 16,000 pairs of jeans donated by eager employees. Because reuse and recycling and the circular economy was at the heart of every decision, they decided to opt for wood rather than concrete, because the wood can be then reused and concrete less so. They decided to reuse windows from buildings, old office buildings that were demolished. Even the fire hose pipes were pre-loved, basically. Pavement slabs came from previous buildings. And every product that they used in this particular building came with its own story, came with its own heritage. And they honored this heritage and they honored this, where it came from. What they discovered is that these materials, putting reuse prioritizing reuse, really helped them take a stand and guide their design. So this company offers a variety of different services. They have members in the collective who can help extract unhydrated cement from old concrete. So basically what that means is when you pour concrete, not all of the cement reacts immediately. It takes time for the cement to react and to harden and set. So at the point of demolition, there's always some amount of cement within this concrete that hasn't really reacted and can be reused. Until this point in time, we always thought that it's impossible to recover cement from old concrete. But there's a member in this particular group who has, won several, at least 2 important prizes in major conferences, showcasing their product, and they show that they are able to do this. And so that's something I found really interesting. They're able to recover not just aggregate, that's sand and gravel. They're able to recover unhydrated cement. They're able to recover steel, of course. They're able to recover and reuse fire hose pipes, plastics, paving, stones. So really it's about even the nuts and bolts can be reused and recycled. So yeah.
Right. So this sort of goes back to where you started, right? You said that the main challenge that you see in the construction industry that we tear down buildings and we build them new, and what we tear down goes straight into the landfill, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this company and its partners are saying that I can take a building part by part, right? Insulation, water pipes, flooring, doors, components of the concrete itself, including cement, and then use that to a new building. Is that the sort of collective solution?
Yes. What happens, it's one of the biggest challenges for the circular economy is that our buildings currently are not designed to be disassembled. They are not designed with the intention of, if you talk about recycling glass, for example. So what this company, this collective does is that they understand that these buildings were not built for disassembly. Nonetheless, they take extra care to kind of extract these individual components of a building and store them.
Right. Sort of take the circularity concept a little step further, and that is use of bio materials, right? And you give examples from all over the world.
Absolutely. And that's really interesting, right? So looking at taking inspiration from nature, I think, is a key solution that we will find more and more as we go forward. So there's this company called Biome that is making construction products out of materials that are traditionally part of waste streams. So they're making insulation panels made of mycelium, and they're going places. The kind of projects that I see them involved in now, I really hope and wish that many other companies also, can get inspired and similarly find financial success as well as social environmental success. There's a company in Rwanda, like I mentioned. It's a German setup, but they are based in Rwanda, where it's a win-win for both, because a country like Rwanda, for example, imports so much of the materials that is used in construction. And if they're able to then replace this construction and build it instead with straw-based panels, it's a win-win, right? It saves them so much on charges, and also helps farmers find a way to reuse material that they would otherwise have thrown away or burnt. And so that's really promising.
And it is. The German company was where it is based in, and you said this is a very interesting case study to talk about a company which is already making progress.
So they really worked very closely with huge market players. They also worked very closely with people in academic circles, so that the so they could really study and prove that the quality of material that they are creating could stand up to any conventional construction product, and could be even better, because there are no volatile organic compounds that are being emitted when these products are used. There are no, at the end of life, it can be completely recycled, and a new board can be created afresh, things like that. So they really took care to pay attention to every person along the value chain, not just the end consumer. And that's important, because you have to look at how these products are being made, because more often than not, our current economy externalizes the cost onto societies and onto the environment. And that's why we are in such a big pickle.
Right. And so this company was able to work with the industry players to bring their solution to the market. And of course, take the help of the academic community to kind of, to bring in the necessary R&D on its products.
Yes.
Is that what you're trying to say? Great. Kiran, your book got published. At least I got it the very same week that Mr. Gates published his book, and one of the terms Mr. Gates uses in his book is a term called green premium, right? Which is the price, the additional price one has to pay for a green product than you pay for a conventional product, in which, as you said, externalities are passed on to the society.
It's quite interesting for me that when I went to these, when I was doing my research and I visited this place where they were recycling construction and demolition waste and recycled it, basically, people there told me that there's, if we don't identify sand and gravel as quarried sand, why should we identify this material as recycled sand? Because they felt that there was a stigma attached to it, and customers did not want to be singled out, even though they were buying it showcased as they were using recycled sand. That's in the UK. So I found that really interesting. What was also interesting is that they said, when you go to, customers expected recycled materials to be cheaper. In the UK, there's a thriving charity sector. Like lots of charity shops. When you go and buy clothes, for example, in charity shops, you don't expect them to be higher priced than new clothes, right?
Right.
So the expectation there is that because it's a recycled product, it will be cheaper. Now, the challenge there is that because we externalize the true cost of materials onto the environment and to societies, we don't really see the true cost of these products, right? When we're talking about man-made materials, there's cost involved in setting up, there's cost involved in training people, there's cost involved in, whereas in natural materials, nature has done all the work for us, and we're not accounting for that particular cost. So it can seem like there's this green premium to be paid. Oh, only people who can afford to pay this green premium can pay it. But I'd urge you to think about it. There's no economy, there's no business on a dead planet. We are talking about a time where we are in a climate emergency. So the way we talk about these things has to be radically different.
This is so very nice, because you bring up so many important points. You say, first of all, that the accounting for green premium does not obviously take consideration the work nature has done for us to build this product in the first place.
Yes.
But you also bring up about that customers are not necessarily rational human beings. That yes. even in the United Kingdom, which is obviously, at least under the present administration, has very ambitious climate goals, customers feel a little queasy to use recycled products, right?
Yes.
And that's something that has to be addressed.
Yes. I found this, so that there's this company called Stone Cycling from the Netherlands that I've also featured in the book. And it was very interesting to hear the CEO talk. And he was saying that when he goes to customers and he tries to sell sustainability and things like that, he finds that many are really interested in the aesthetics, and how beautiful these products are. And so It really depends, I guess, on the kind of customers that you're talking to. For him, making products, his products are slightly more expensive than traditional conventional products. But the problem is that those who are producing traditional bricks, people there own the land from which this material is being extracted, and that's not accounted for, right? The kind of subsidies that they are getting in that sense. Whereas for him, he has to start everything from scratch. So there is definitely cost involved there. That when we're talking about, we take nature for granted basically, and we have to account for that kind of those kind of expectations.
Kiran, I really like the way you've described the magnitude of the problem. When you say 18 kilos per person per day, I think it's a very simple statement to understand, but it shows how deep the problem is there. You also mentioned a lot of things right now.
Mm-hmm.
Now, given all this, we are living in an emergency for the environment right now. How do you find alternate products coming in an industry which is risk averse, which requires highest qualities of safety, uh, quality standards, the costing, the safety has to be very high, and it has to be on a large scale as well. It cannot be on an experimental stage, considering that the requirement is it's about 18 kilos of sand being consumed per person per day. So, what are the challenges that alternate construction products will find in getting quality standards accepted? Are the testing codes different? How does this kind of catch up in the industry?
So I think we're on the right track, but we need to pick up pace. I mentioned Zurich, which is now building in 2002, Zurich designed a school using 80%, I think it was, recycled concrete. Thereafter, they found by 2005, they made it mandatory for all public buildings to use recycled concrete. In 2015, they added another component, which is saying that all like public buildings have to use low carbon cement. And so now you find examples where people are building buildings with 95% recycled concrete, 98% recycled concrete. That's the kind of scale, that's what's possible. So 20% is great, but it's not nearly enough. And we have to really scale up. So I think raising awareness of the possibilities is the first step.
So, what you're saying is that the construction companies, the people who make these products, and the government agencies need to work in a very strong collaboration and raise the 20% upwards.
Absolutely.
And how do you see, I mean, let's say in a country like India, how do you see what will be the key challenges in a country like India to take this from 20% to 40% or a 50%?
One of the biggest challenges I think that India faces is the lack of data. You don't find reliable data so there's no, in the public domain, it's very hard to find how much sand and gravel is required. Where is it coming from? How much are we extracting at the moment? How much do we ultimately need? These are fundamental questions, right? Without knowing the amount we need, where we're going, how can individual businesses or industries plan alternatives? So keeping track of this data, I think, is really crucial. So there's some really interesting research being done between the government of Norway is working with India in order to treat and recycle construction and demolition waste. So it's really interesting. They haven't yet published stuff, so I don't want to say anything before they have published stuff widely. But I think we will see interesting developments going forward. Keeping track of data is important. Increasing transparency about that data is equally important. So I think I'm seeing examples of things like this happening slowly. For example, 2 days ago, I came across this company called Structure, I think. I'm scheduled to talk with the CEO. It's been set up by a young woman who studied civil engineering and then worked in the States for some time. And now she has developed, she built a hospital within a few days, right? A COVID hospital for COVID patients and things like that. She builds panels using straw, similar to what I was mentioning, the company in Rwanda. So this is a similar product that she's building for the Indian market. She has won awards where, under 30 awards. I can, but I find it fascinating to see examples like this. I think it's a slow process, and what we need to do is really look for and pay attention to and amplify their voices. And that's how I think they can find more traction and reach newer audiences.
I think that's a lovely example you've given. Taking a cue from this, since you mentioned about COVID, uh, today's paper mentioned, and we've been reading about it, there may be a migration to tier 2, tier 3 cities. In fact, today's paper says that most of the home loans are coming in from tier 3, tier 4 cities now. Do you therefore see a construction industry moving to a smaller city and therefore an opportunity to kind of rebuild or reshape the construction industry?
So prior to the pandemic, the world was on course to build a New York City a month, right? For the next 40 years. Insane kind of statistics. This is the traditional way of doing things. And yes, I do find other experts talking about how construction is now moving to smaller cities, and people don't want to live in larger cities. So there is a great opportunity here to do things differently.
On that note, I think it is, thank you very much, Kiran.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Such a pleasure and privilege. I really enjoyed this conversation.